Complement the current exhibition here at the MAH. This broad theme has allowed this evening's presenters to speak about projects, ideas, experiences, art, work, research, or lifelong endeavors that are a work in progress. And so let's get rolling. Our first presenter tonight is Tanya Merchant. She's an ethnomusicologist. She's on the faculty of UCSC's music department. And you here? You ready to go? Sure. All right, let's hear it for Tanya.
So I do research on women in music. I've been doing this kind of research in Uzbekistan for about the last 13 years, and for about the last 10 months I've been doing more research on Bosnia. So I'm going to share a little bit of both of these. It's been really interesting for me to think about both of these projects and both of these places. One is in Asia and one is in Europe, and yet they share so much. Both of them have been controlled by a variety of empires. Both of them had a communist period in the 20th century, and both of them are now independent nations really working on national projects. So I'm going to start with Uzbekistan, purple Uzbekistan. And one of the interesting things is that all of this history is sort of evident in the capital. You can see the only metro station to be named after a musicologist there, near a mud and straw brick mosque in the old city near where I usually live when I'm there. There are smoked glass buildings built after independence from the Soviet Union. You can see even transport. You see traditional araba, the donkey carts, next to Zhigulis from the Soviet Union, next to South Korean autos. This is the new Conservatory of Music built in 2002 with mirrored columns. It's very sort of classic and yet modern at the same time. It's really interesting. And so what I think about is how women use music to represent themselves. And one of the interesting ideas that people have really caught on to is the ichkara. Ichkara means inside in Uzbekistan. And it's this idea that women have historically been secluded from public life. And they've had gender segregated wedding celebrations. They've had to make their own entertainment in their inner courtyards of their houses. One of the ways they do this is with the dutar. This is a photo from 1907. This is a photo from 2005. They still play. This is an instrument that I play as part of my research. And this is sort of a modern representation of this sort of inner space in these houses. And you can see here's a wedding going on. The greeting of the bride into the threshold is a big deal. And they're still playing dutar and doing these wedding celebrations with instruments that are historically women's instruments, which are frame drums and this dutar. That's all they got to play, and that's because they were sort of soft sounds. They were okay for indoor instruments, right? You don't want large brass instruments playing in the middle of your tiny courtyard. So here's, still a gender-segregated wedding celebration. People are dancing. You can't see, I'm taking a photograph from the position of the women musicians. Here we have the first woman to actually perform as part of their art music, which is called maqam. It's similar to the traditions in the Arab world and the Turkic world of art music dating back to the 15th century. During the Soviet era, women were pushed as part of the hujum, the assault in the 1920s. They were pushed into public life, and Manikopa, who you just saw go by, was the first woman to play dutar in the state radio ensemble. So here's a traditional ensemble, dutar and frame drum, right, called doira. And it's interesting because this has now been institutionalized in the shiny mirror-columned conservatory. And you have traditional ensembles, and then during the Soviet era, they reworked the dutar. You can see it's a lot smaller, and instead of being accompanied by a frame drum, all of a sudden it's being accompanied by a pianist playing from notation. And so another thing that they did with this was they created sort of concerts, like the violin family has violin, viola, cello. They did the same thing with the dutars and with other instruments. So they took a traditional ensemble, which has different instruments and usually a vocalist, and they exploded it into this symphony orchestra. And women have been really active in all of these processes. This is Munajati Lichieva, the most famous maqam singer in all of Uzbekistan. And here is Malika Zioeva again. Now she's gone on from the radio maqam ensemble to start her own ensemble of her students. It's a mixed gender ensemble. Men do play the dutar, but it doesn't make them girly. About women's instruments, it's really, really feminine for you to play the dutar, but as soon as a man picks it up, well, I guess that feminine stuff just isn't strong enough, it doesn't rub off. There's also a women's dutar ensemble in the state radio that is using more reconstructed instruments. This is you can see it's made from slightly different material, it's a little different, but now the size of So women have latched onto this idea of the ichikare as justification for a variety of music making. People will talk about the idea that women have been making music for centuries in their own private lives, even though they're doing things like directing a giant folk orchestra, as you see Feruza Abdurrahimova doing. And I find this really interesting. And the last piece that we have, this is another way that the dutar has sort of spread out. This is in Tashkent in the Japanese Business Center, where a lot of Japanese men come over to do business, and they bring their wives who don't tend to have much to do, so they started a women's dutar ensemble for Japanese housewives. So now thinking about Bosnia, similar processes with, of course, the war in the 1990s being very much in the forefront of how people are thinking about nationalism. And one of the things that interests me about this is it has the same history of gender-segregated events and female seclusion. Instead of the ichikare meaning inside, you have the haramluk, which literally means it's the same sort of the women's quarters, if you will. And you can see the same sort of thing going on architecturally. This is the Başçarşya, the old city. You can see Ottoman-style architecture. You can see the bombed-out barracks from the war and smoked glass TV towers rising. You can see how all of this is mixing together. And so here we have a picture from the haramluk of women in their quarters entertaining themselves. And people do talk about this history, but it is interesting to me that it isn't being talked about in terms of justifying women's activities now, at least from what I've seen from my big, huge 10 months of research so far. We'll see. One of the things that interests me is here on the left, on the right, your left, you have women who have been successful performers during the communist era between World War II and the war in the 90s. And then it's interesting that women, young women especially, are on the forefront of what's going on to remake traditional music in the post-war era. And I'm done.
I think it's great when we can get people down from UCSC.